Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to Career Hacks and Snacks. I've got a phenomenal guest here with us today. This is Mr. Flip Brown of Business Culture Consultants, and he is here to talk to us a little bit about his work in culture transformation, coaching, and just his overarching philosophy on how things work. Flip is an excellent person to talk to when you need both support or something funny or an idiom that you had never thought of before. He always has something fun to add to the conversation. So super excited to chat with you, Flip. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Well, I'm in my 25th year of a solo practice, so been doing this for a little while, and I'm just fascinated by what happens when good people show up in a workplace and try to do some cool stuff and actually, do some good in the world. I've had five major careers.
That's so many.
My first business, I was a craftsman. I made custom hardwood furniture. I had a woodworking shop, lived in a town of 13 people for 6 years. Yeah, there's a lot more to unpack there.
I was like,
And then
wow, that's like a wine story potentially.
And then at the age of 24, I got on skis for the first time. And it's like, well, this is magical, because people go to these new age crystal shops and, to buy these things. And all you got to do is wait till winter and they fall out of the sky and then they accumulate. You can slide on them.
So skiing was a revelation for you?
Skiing was magic. I love winter. I have northern blood. Cold for me starts at about 10 degrees. As part of my self-care program, I went skiing this morning.
I mean, that's just like an argument for like being in business for yourself right there.
Yeah, I did not have to ask my boss's permission. Well, I did, and he said, yeah, go for it. So I
I love
actually
it.
then went into the ski industry and I started working for a European manufacturer of ski equipment. So I made 15 business trips to Europe. And that was my first exposure to different business cultures because working for a French company, I just thought the food and wine would be better, but they actually had a very different orientation to how to do business. That was an interesting ride for 3 years and I got to ski for free everywhere, but I fried myself to a crisp. I realized that part of that industry was basically drinking as much wine as you could every day. So I left that business and didn't know what I was going to do next. Went back to school, finished an old bachelor's degree because the first time I went to college, I dropped out the fall semester my sophomore year, very stereotypically when the Grateful Dead came to town. I got a bachelor's degree in transpersonal psychology, which is the study of archetypes, collective unconscious, mythology, and then I went on to get a master's degree in counseling psychology and thought maybe I wanted to be a therapist, but then I realized the business model really sucked and I'm just too extroverted to sit in a little room all day.
I've never really thought of like therapy being isolating.
It's populated by introverts. So when I got out of graduate school, I was flat broke and I had to take the first job that came along. And it was intimidating, but it turned out to be great professional development. I worked for almost a year on the mobile crisis team at our community mental health center. So learning how to deal compassionately with acutely psychotic and suicidal people on a daily basis, business owners can freak out all they want. Then became a counselor and the executive director of the agency's largest employee assistance program. It was the largest one in Vermont at the time. And I sold EAP contracts to Ben& Jerry's and Burton Snowboards. And I wanted to add executive coaching and organizational development. My supervisor said, well, we have a union and when the contract comes up in 5 months, we can start talking about it. And I said, not going to wait. August of 2000, I started Business Culture Consultants, and here I am.
What is an employee assistance program? Because I don't think everybody knows what those are.
Sure. Yeah, it is a service that is provided to businesses and their employees to deal with any sort of stress. Could be financial, marital, my boss is a jerk, my kid's smoking too much weed, I have depression, anxiety. Now,
And it's like a first line of defense kind of thing, right? Like
yeah.
it's usually a filtration process too to something else
Right,
sometimes.
because then if people needed more than the contracted number of sessions, which was usually 3 or 8, we would refer them into their insurance benefits and their mental health benefits. We also dealt with organizational stress, and I was trained in critical stress debriefing, and in a couple cases would have to go to the workplace and help the people who had witnessed a serious injury or fatality in the workplace to process their emotions, because you can't watch one of your colleagues die in an industrial accident and then just go right back to work.
That's so interesting. We had somebody die when I worked at the North Face at the campus. It was awful. It
Yeah,
was so,
yeah,
and it was a beloved employee, and it was
yeah.
so sad. And like people were just grieving for weeks and weeks. So that's an amazing service that you provided too. Like, I mean, I would imagine you were a lifeline for a lot of people.
Yeah, and along the way, I did get a unique Vermont independent master's level psychologist license, which I still hold, but I'm actually not providing psychological services because I don't diagnose and treat or provide therapy. Having been trained as a therapist, I know the difference between therapy and coaching, which is really helpful.
I mean, can we talk about that? Actually, let's talk about the difference between therapy and coaching? People confuse the two sometimes when they come
Yes.
into coaching or when they come into therapy too. I mean, I
Yep.
think you can do some coaching in therapy, and you can do some therapy type stuff in coaching, but they are not a replacement for each other.
Well, here's the metaphor that I use, and you probably know this about me by now, as my wonderful wife says, there's not a metaphor analogy for everything, but that doesn't stop me. So if your body is not working well, you go to a physical therapist. If your body is working well, but you want to achieve some different goals, you hire a personal trainer. If your psyche isn't working well, or your emotional regulation system is not working well, you should go to a therapist. But if it's reasonably functional and you want to achieve life goals or business goals, you go to a coach.
This is such a good analogy. Flip.
So I have a podcast series. It's called Holistic Work, spelled with a W. And in one of those podcasts, I talk about how at various points in our lives, we need a friend, a colleague, a peer, a mentor, a coach, or a counselor. And being the certified boomer that I am, the title of the podcast is Help, I Need Somebody, Not Just Anybody.
Because of course, but also there's a music element to that as well.
And so mentors generally don't get paid, right? And it used to be mentor was a relationship of older and younger, but now the youngsters are mentoring us in,
Reverse
technology.
mentorship, right?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Yeah.
It is important the distinction between therapy, particularly, I mean, I appreciate my colleagues who deal with significant mental health and substance use disorder issues,
Yes.
but it is different than coaching as long as we're clear about that. Because the other important thing about either therapy or coaching, or being the therapist or the coach, is if we're looking for validation from our clients, that can be a dangerous thing. One of my first classes in graduate school, it was this very wise woman, and she had taught meditation in maximum security prisons and dealt with, heroin users on the street. I mean, she had really done the work. And she said, there's only four things that matter here. And I'm like, whoa, I better remember this. And she said, number one is show up fully, be present. Number two is listen carefully. Number three, speak what is true for you. And number four, be unattached to the outcome. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Ooh,
Be
that's
unattached to the
that's hard.
outcome. And yeah, because the thing is that if we need our clients to be successful or to reach their goal or to have incredible insights or think that we're really skilled, all we can do is connect to the best of our ability and then see what unfolds. I've given up predicting human behavior, even though I've studied it and influenced it and been influenced by it. I was hired by a CEO out of London to take on the coaching of the manager of an industrial plant. So these folks were making big, heavy machinery
Mhm.
things. And the plant manager had come up through the engineering ranks and he knew every part and piece. He was really smart and he left a trail of pissed off people behind him. And so I almost didn't take it on because I thought maybe he was too closed down, but we connected. And after about 6 weeks, he said, Flip, you keep talking about this thing called emotional intelligence. I still don't really know what that is. Is there some book I could read? Sure, Primal Leadership by Daniel Goleman. He comes back on Monday and he goes, wait a minute. I think I get what you've been telling me. If I have better professional relationships, I'll get better business results. And I'm like, hallelujah.
That's my whole point this last
Right.
6 weeks.
And he
Yes.
went to the
Mhm.
next management team meeting and he said, you know what? It's occurred to me that I don't listen particularly well. I impose my viewpoints on all of you. I cut you off if I'm not in agreement with you. And I really need to make some changes. And I really will need your feedback as I go through this process. There were some jaws that literally dropped.
I
People
mean,
thought,
don't you feel like that just that like self-awareness recognition is enough to like change people's hearts and minds on the other side though? When somebody finally gets that self-recognition, it's
yeah,
huge.
well, it's huge. And that's why if I'm going to take on a new client, leaders or owners or executive directors need to have three essential ingredients. One is integrity.
Hmm.
Number two is they have to have what I call appropriate professional vulnerability.
Okay.
They have to be willing to look at the gap between how they see themselves and how they're seen by others.
Hmm. Okay.
When I was working with a client in London last summer, you can't ride the tube without seeing mind the gap, and we need to mind the gap between, again, ourselves and other people's perceptions. And then the third element is the willingness to both go into and lead their teams into the unknown. Because when I deliver a proposal, it has a paragraph that I call the uncertainty factor. While we will do our best at the outset, to identify the goals, methods, logistics, and desired outcomes. Once we begin to do the work, it will unfold in ways that cannot be accurately or totally predicted in advance. Therefore, if at some point you're not feeling confused, doubtful, frustrated, or anxious, we're probably not doing it right.
I work in a very outcome-based coaching space. I
Yep.
do a lot of everything, but I do a lot right now, particularly in this market of job search coaching, where like the outcome is very clear. We know what we're getting to, we know what the goal is. It might be a little bit different than we were thinking, but ultimately, like we know where we're going. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that sort of unknown of where this path is taking us. Even in my outcome based coaching of like knowing where the goal is, 70% of the time doesn't wind up where exactly we think it's going to. We've talked about the sort of personal and professional connection. Tell me a little bit about your work in there.
I have been extremely fortunate to have had a number of, I call them guides, and some of them would wear the professional label of therapist, but some are outside of that. And currently, I have a wonderful man who's probably 5 or 10 years older than me. He was my meditation instructor, but now he's my meditation mentor. He refuses to take any more money from me. We talk once a month because he enjoys the conversation too. And then I also have a spiritual guide, and was a major part of me healing from some significant childhood trauma. And so, as we integrate ourselves in terms of getting rid of any damaged sense of self, any insecurities, any lack of confidence, because one of the things about growing up in Western culture is that there's the rules, there's the commandments, someday if you do all the right things, you'll be good enough. And in the Eastern traditions, they start with, we all have a basic human goodness that nothing can touch, but that's obscured. We forget that. A lot of people I work with, they set high standards for themselves, and then they have the critical inner voice that is harder on themselves than anyone else is.
Yes.
And so, how do we practice radical self-acceptance while we're also being humble and
That's a tough
understanding?
thing to do, though. I feel like most people are not good at that. The people that are wildly self confident are annoying because they are not self aware. And vice versa, the folks that bring so much to the table that don't have the confidence are frustrating because,
Yeah.
like, they deserve it. How do you find that balance?
There's a word that I love that it gives a lot of people trouble in understanding it. That word is equanimity.
Okay.
And equanimity essentially means I have a clear, strong center that is not based on ego or identity. It's my being. I can rest in that being regardless of what's going on outside. So, for example, whatever your politics are, you can easily get into the point of the other is going to screw things up and blah, blah, blah. And so I was talking to my meditation mentor about this, and I said, it took me a little bit, but I did get to the point of equanimity in terms of I can't predict, no one can predict what's going to happen. And I refuse to allow my vital life energy to be disrupted or pulled off center because of someone else's drama. And he was talking about equanimity is not passive. There can be a vibrancy to that equanimity. So, for example, if you're hanging out with someone else's kids,
Mm-hmm.
they're being rowdy or misbehaving or, grabbing a candy bar in the
Yeah.
checkout line or whatever, it doesn't usually trigger you. You just see the behavior for what it is. But when it's your kids, you see,
But that's like an attachment of personal importance.
yes, and the idea is that if we can practice radical self-acceptance with humility, we can do that for others. It's how do we extend compassion first to ourselves and then to others?
It's soothing as a coach to know that other people struggle. I watch other people struggle and I'm like, I can help fix that. Myself, it's so much harder, right? It's so much harder to fix anything. And I really believe this is why coaches exist, why therapists exist, why meditation guides exist,
Yep.
is because no one can be objective about themselves without reflection from someone else.
My meditation teacher was at a conference with the Dalai Lama, and they're actually part of the same lineage.
See,
And someone in the audience asked him, how do you deal with negative self-talk in your culture? And his English is pretty good, but he huddled with his translators and came back and said, we actually don't know what you're speaking about. So yeah, it is a cultural thing. It's important for us to be as invested in our own personal and professional integration as it is for our clients. And, I have the benefit on one level, the only difference between me and you is I've had a lot more revolutions around the sun.
There's a lot of other differences. You have a lot of different things that I've never done too. But yeah, for sure.
But, my point is that with experience, you earn some pearls of wisdom. Some of them fall in your pocket and some of them are given to you by others.
And I love that. And I think, lived experience is super unique too, because people ask me a lot of times about, will you be the right coach for me based on your lived experience, based on, where you've been, what you've done? I struggle with that question a little bit because, I feel like the work that I do is digging into
Hmm.
people more than anything, like distilling their information, building cohesive stories, helping them connect dots to
Right.
explain things and understand themselves and explain it outwardly for their career more than it is about, building your tools of resume and LinkedIn, et cetera. It's about storytelling and the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell other people about ourselves and what we understand. And to me, it's like, the coach is it's the person who's going to get to the core of you. Doesn't necessarily matter about those lived experiences. It's the person who can ask the right questions. It's the
Sure.
person who can understand what your answers mean and connect them to some sort of action or result. I think it was interesting. I was talking to Deb a minute ago, and she was
Yeah.
talking about thoughts, actions, and feelings. And one of the things that she was working through was stopping off at feelings before getting to actions instead of going
Mm.
directly from thoughts to actions. What you were talking about made me think of that too, is we don't stop to think about things. We don't stop to like connect the dots. We don't stop to connect the personal and the professional. We just want to be in such an action state of mind all the time that like a coach, I think, can help you stop at feelings, stop at thoughts, and get yourself to action.
For those of us who identify as men in this culture, we don't get much support in terms of paying attention to what our bodies are saying. For decades, my intellect was the king and my body was just a rental car to get me around. So I've really benefited from a technique called somatic healing, which really gets me into now I will stop and go, wait a minute, I'm getting some information here before I blah, blah, blah. I really need to feel my way into it. So it's interesting. One of the tools that I use with my clients is that I can share with you a thought, a feeling, an opinion, a suggestion, an invitation, a request, a requirement, or a demand. And what happens a lot in business is that someone in a position of authority will make a request and the employee hears it and interprets it as a suggestion. It's not accurate transmission and reception. What I do in my work, because I ask my clients for a 12-month commitment and I get a backstage pass so that I can observe where the alignment is, but also where the disconnects are. And when I see two people that aren't communicating well and their nonverbals will usually indicate that as well, then that's an opportunity for us to understand what are the obstacles here. Is it emotional? Is it lack of shared expectations and assumptions? And then we work through that over time.
What you were talking about before too, like perception is such a huge piece of all of this, right? And being able to recognize that your perception is different than other people's perception. And that, at least in my world of job coaching, it doesn't matter what your perception is. It matters what the other person's perception is. It matters
Right.
what the market is asking of you. It matters what your role is asking of you. And it's a very plug yourself into a specific type of hole. It's performative. There's so much performative activity about that. And I'm always like, change the system when you get there, but you got to work with it the way it is right now. So
And this is why email and text is such a problem, because if I call you on your phone and I get your voicemail and I say, hey, Kate, I need to talk to you versus, hey, Kate, I need to talk to you. Same words, very different message. And
yeah, and
people,
HR is very much like that, right? Where it's like, I put something on your calendar. Did
yeah,
I put a smiley face next to it? Did I
right.
put like, is there
Yeah.
an explanation?
Yeah. And so, that's why it's so important to have, Zoom is the best we have, even though it doesn't give us the full sense of humanity. Email has caused, I think, as many problems as it solved.
Oh my God, Flip, I love this conversation so much. I'm so excited about. You are so wise and lovely and kind for being here and sharing with us. I'm going to need to make a very abrupt shift into snacks because that
Yes.
is so important to me on a very,
Right.
hungry level. So tell me, what is the snacking habits, food? What fuels your career?
There's some seasonality to it because in the summer I've cut back, but I have 15 4 by 6 foot raised beds. And one thing that most people have never experienced is fresh edamame. Because when you go to a Japanese restaurant,
edamame? That's neat.
Yeah, when you go to a Japanese restaurant, it's always has been previously frozen. Fresh edamame is just a different thing.
Is it
Yeah.
crunchier?
Well, it's a soybean, so it's fresh as opposed to frozen and then brought back to life. So if it was the summer, I would have boiled up a batch of edamame. But my historical snack, which I used to come home from school every day
Oh, I love childhood snacks.
and make a big bowl of popcorn.
But like, are you putting real butter on this popcorn? Because if you're not, we can't talk anymore.
Cabot, unsalted.
Yes.
My
Okay,
local,
because if you're not putting real butter on your popcorn, like, what are you even doing with your life?
and then Himalayan pink salt.
Yes. Okay. I have not done the Himalayan pink salt, but I
Yeah,
have, in fact, poured a lot of butter on popcorn in my lifetime. So
right.
you were a
Yeah,
popcorn kid. Okay. Why? Because it was
popcorn
easy
kid.
to make? Was that the.
In our family, we had this appliance, and it was called a stir crazy.
Is that the
Flat,
pot that you stir?
it's round. You plug it in. It's electric, and there's a wire that goes around. So you just
Yeah.
put the popcorn, and then there's a yellow plastic dome, which then
Oh.
when it's done, you just flip it over, and you got a bowl of popcorn.
Okay, I'm not even joking. I'm pretty sure we have that, and it was made of asbestos in my childhood. We had one of those like yellow, and it looked like a thing that would come out. We had an old school popcorn maker, and it made the best popcorn I've ever had in my
Was it
life.
an air popper? That was an air popper. Yeah.
Okay, well, we had an air popper, and it was amazing.
Popcorn is just the old reliable.
I
Uh,
love it. Do you put other
and
things in your popcorn? Do you get fancy?
No, brewer's yeast and all that kelp
Oh,
flakes and all that hippie stuff, been there, done that. But no, I just like it
I
straight
love
up,
it.
organic popcorn, unsalted butter, and then put the salt on.
Yeah,
So,
but you do put the salt on. You have to put the salt on. So
yeah.
tell me, what's your food aversion? What do you hate to eat?
My last hamburger was a Wendy's double in Cincinnati, Ohio in December of 1973.
Oh my God, you haven't had a hamburger since 1973?
Now,
Are you a vegetarian?
I'm an ovo-lacto pesco vegetarian, so I
Okay,
eat
so no red
eggs,
meat.
dairy, and fish. I can knock down a dozen raw oysters with no problem, but poultry, pork, beef, I never liked it as a kid. It's just a
That's
taste and
wild.
texture thing. I mean, if you ethically raise and slaughter animals, I don't have a problem with that. It's sort of like for meat eaters, no one is neutral on liver. You either like it if it's well done, or it will never
Mhm.
pass your lips.
I
So
don't think
that's
I've ever
one.
eaten liver outside of like liverwurst, Braunschweiger
Yeah,
on a
right.
cracker that my grandma used to give
But
me.
the other weird thing is I love a big kosher dill pickle. I cannot handle raw cucumbers.
Cucumbers, they don't go well. I feel
Yeah,
like you taste them for 7 years after you eat them. I feel like I never stop tasting cucumbers if I eat
right.
them.
Yeah.
I'll eat a pickle. I won't eat a whole pickle.
But I
Right.
do have to make a plug for the Athletic non-alcoholic beer.
Okay, tell me about it. It's good. Tastes like
Well,
real beer or no?
November 19th, it was 35 years since I had any alcohol, because I had the tolerance gene on both sides. And I was a member of the If Some is Good, More is Better club.
No, I know people like that.
So this Athletic is a company that makes the best. They figured out how to make a really good tasting hoppy
Okay.
beverage without boiling off the alcohol, which is what, O'Doul's and all that other crap is. So I love the company. I've got friends there. Athletic is the name of the company, and then they make a dozen different non-alcoholic beers. This one's
Love it.
called Run Wild. It's an IPA. It goes very well with my popcorn.
Okay, awesome. I love it. Yeah, I'm not a beer person. I don't drink a lot of alcohol because it makes me bright red. I like have like a reaction to it every time I drink it. So it's
Yeah.
like I like the taste of it, but also I just don't love being bright red all day. The one beer that I love is Sam's Summer Ale. Sam
Mm.
Adams Summer Ale. It's
Yeah.
like one beer that I've seemingly can get attached to and really enjoy. I don't even know what
That's
kind of beer it
it's
is.
probably a wheat beer.
I'm pretty sure it is, but it's
Yep.
very light, very yellow, and it's very tasty.
And they often squeeze a little lemon in it.
I like citrus and everything. And actually, like people will learn about me through this process of watching this show. I like to put vinegar on everything, any kind of vinegar on whatever I'm eating. I need it. It's like, people put hot sauce on everything.
That's me.
Douse it in vinegar, whatever you do. Cottage
Right.
cheese, vinegar. I love tang. I love it like burning my mouth tangy.
Yeah,
So I
cool.
love it. Okay, well, awesome. And when do you snack? When do you get your snack attacks?
My backup snack is salted in the shell peanuts, which I have after dinner. My wife and I had a consulting relationship for 5 years with the world's largest producer of industrial chocolate. And so they would sell me 5 kilo bars, that's 11 pounds, of their Belgian dark for $10. So now I get it from a wholesale restaurant supply house in Portland, Maine, and it costs about $57 to get 11 pounds of dark chocolate.
Oh my God, you're crushing me. But like shave some of that into your popcorn.
We have a little container with a snap lid and we have a little blunt knife. And so, after dinner, you just break off a little chunk. It's not a candy, it's a food.
You call it whatever you want, it's still candy.
No, 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 no. Candy is something that you usually eat too much and it usually has very little nutritional value.
Okay, fair.
Dark chocolate is loaded with antioxidants, and if you just have a small chunk, there's not a big caloric intake, and it tells your mouth that the meal is over.
I mean, I feel that in my soul though, that like you need something to tell you that the meal is over. Chocolate keeps me up now though. If I have chocolate at night, it like acts almost like like the caffeine in it really does
Wow.
sort of affect me. I know, what a nerd. So uncool. I used to be able to like drink a bunch of alcohol and eat a bunch of chocolate and have a bunch of coffee and it never affected me. Now I'm like bright red with the alcohol, awake with the chocolate. All right. Well, Flip, you're amazing. And, I adore you. And I'm so excited that you came on here to chat with me. And I feel like such an insightful discussion, too. You have such insights to share. And every time I talk to you, I learn something new. And I love that. Tell us, where can we find you and where can we engage you for business?
Sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Flip Brown there. And then
Okay. All right.
my business website is businesscultureconsultants.com. And I just love to talk to people. So if somebody wants to chat like this, I'm happy to do that because you never know, how one conversation is going to lead to an opportunity. And, we're all trying to figure this out. We're all trying to do good for ourselves and our families and the world. So yeah, I'd love to connect.
I know, I know. And I'm so glad that I met you. And thank you so much for, all of the support that you've given me in my business and just in general being a lovely, lovely human. So
I just want to say back at you because you are a fountain of enthusiasm and energy, and you help people to really live into their dreams.
that's what I want to do. I just
Yeah.
want to be a non-problematic, non-disappointing leader. That is my whole goal in life, is to be like just a non-problematic person that is what people think I am. If we can all live in our truths that way, it's just like we've all been successful somehow. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for checking us out here on Career Hacks and Snacks. Whatever this is, it's
Yep.
sort of like a podcast. It's sort of sessions. It's sort of, slightly therapeutic and learning about people's careers. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye, all.
Thanks, Kate. Bye.